you've seen this message on your screen when you wanted to activate an effect that says you have missed the activation timing. Maybe you don't know why the game didn't give you the option to activate a card, or maybe you've just heard a bunch of pro players mentioning missing the timing and their explanation doesn't make any sense. In this video, I'm going to try to make this difficult rule of Yu-Gi-Oh! Seem really simple to understand. In order to understand why anything can miss timing, we have to understand two fundamental aspects of Yu-Gi-Oh! And these are the way that chain links work and also the way that Yu-Gi-Oh! Card text is written. A chain link in Yu-Gi-Oh!, as you may know, is a series of the players in a duel reacting to each other's actions. We can get more in depth about chain links in another video, but what we need to know here is that if there is currently no actions taking place in a duel, then the player who first does something in that scenario will be giving the opponent an opportunity to react to that action. Quick note, you can only respond with cards that are quick effects. Those include any trap, any quick play spell, and any text that specifically mentions quick effect or says that it can be used during the opponent's turn. The exception to this is when multiple effects go on the chain at the same time, but that is for another video. Anytime a player makes an action or reaction, they must let the opponent have a chance to respond before they can react to themselves. The series of reactions is a chain link, and nothing on the chain link gets to happen until both players either stop adding effects to it or can't add any more effects to it. Once the chain link stops, then each effect within the chain will happen in order from most recent to the first effect that activated. So if I activate Jar of Greed and then you chain your own Jar of Greed and then I chain 7 tools of the Bandit, then since my 7 tools was the thing that happened most recently, it will get to resolve first, and it will negate your Jar of Greed, and then it will come time for your Jar of Greed since it is next on the chain link, and since it is negated, then it will resolve negated and we will move on to the next chain link, my own Jar of Greed, which will draw me a card, and then the chain link will be over. The most important thing you need to know about chain links when it comes to this video is that while the effects in a chain link are in the process of resolving, neither player can do anything. Both players just have to wait until it is all done before they can do anything again. I'll just say it one more time so that you remember. Neither player can do anything while the chain is in the process of resolving. So if you want your effect to be a part of a chain, you have to chain to the cards within it while you have the chance before both you and your opponent say no to reacting to cards in it. And that very fact that you can't do anything while a chain is resolving is where missing the activation timing can happen. What if by the fact of one of the cards resolving within that chain, the activation requirements of another card is met? For example, if you summon Orchest Harp Horror and in response to that summon I chain Karma Cut by discarding Archfiend of Gilfer and targeting the harp, then Karma Cut is currently on the chain and Gilfer has an effect it can activate when it is sent to the grave. Gilfer will need to wait until the existing chain has finished resolving in order to use its effect, because it can only recognize that its activation requirement has been met after the chain it was met in has resolved, that being it was sent to the graveyard, and since it isn't a quick effect, it cannot respond to anything on the chain. So after the chain resolves and Karma Cut has been activated, then Gilfer will start a new chain. The problem is that there are scenarios where it won't be able to start a new chain due to missing the activation timing. We'll get back to that in a second, because first we need to talk about card text in Yu-Gi-Oh! For a bit. In Yu-Gi-Oh! There are a lot of rules and a lot of complications, so in order to standardize people's understanding of how cards work and interact with each other, they have rules for how cards themselves are written, so that if one card says something one way and another card says something the same way, we will be able to tell that they work the same way. There are certain keywords in Yu-Gi-Oh! Text that players can look out for to find out what rules will apply to them and how those rules will apply to them. When it comes to missing the timing, cards with trigger effects can be split up into 2 groups, optional and non-optional. Of course, as you might be able to tell, a card is optional when you can choose whether or not you can use it once when it is met its activation condition, and non-optional is when it just happens and you don't have a choice in the matter. How can you tell the difference between them? Well, you look at their activation conditions and you look for the words "you can." Here's a couple of examples: Tackle Crusader and Whitestone of Legend. Tackle Crusader's activation condition is if this card is sent to the graveyard, and then it says you can activate one of these effects. So Tackle Crusader here lets you choose whether or not to use it if it is sent to the grave. Whitestone of Legend's activation condition is when this card is sent to the graveyard, and then it doesn't say the words "you can" in the effect. It just immediately will search Blue Eyes from deck to hand without asking you if you want it or not. When a card isn't optional, like Whitestone of Legend, there is no possibility of it missing activation timing because of the fact that it is already determined to happen as soon as it meets its activation condition. It will still need to wait for the chain to resolve though, so that it can go on a new chain. So if a card's effect doesn't say "you can" on it, don't worry, it isn't ever going to miss activation timing. So that leaves the optional effects. We got to talk about those. Once again, any card that says "you can" is optional whether or not you use it. The one exception is any face down trap card or quick play spell card. Trap cards and quick play spell cards are all optional to activate, so because of that, it is redundant to put the words "you can" on them. Just pretend that all quick plays and traps have "you can" on them because you have the option of whether to flip them up or not. When it comes to optional effects, what happens when they meet their activation conditions while a chain is resolving? They have to wait for the chain to finish resolving, and then they will begin a new chain. However, there are situations in which some optional cards will do better than others in this scenario. If the activation condition of a card says the word "when," then the card has no choice but to be used immediately after it has met its condition. It can't wait. It must happen at that time, which is why it uses the word "when," because the word "when" refers to the time in which it has met its conditions. So if one of the effects in the chain happened to summon a monster, then you can't activate something like Warning Point if there are more effects left to resolve. As you might remember, while a chain is in the process of resolving, you can't do anything until it's over. By the time the chain has finished resolving, other events have already happened, so you have missed your chance. Always remember that if a card says "when," it can only work if you can use it immediately as it meets its activation condition. That said though, there is a way around that. If the very last card to resolve in the chain, that being the card that started the chain in the first place, is the card that caused the activation condition, of your card to be met, then it will be able to use its effect immediately, because immediately after that last card on the chain is resolved, then the chain isn't there anymore, so it can be used. On the other hand, an optional card that says "if" in its activation requirements can always wait until the chain has finished resolving, and it will be able to start a new chain. Since it says "if," which refers to an event occurring at all, it doesn't have to be used immediately after the condition has been met. It can wait to be used until the first possible moment. There are cards that say the words "if" and "when" on them, but do not say "you can" on them. You can treat them as exactly the same, as they don't actually have any differences between each other, and they will never miss timing. But what happens if more than one optional effect meets its activation requirement in the middle of a chain resolving? Well, they will enter the chain in the opposite order of when their activation conditions were met. So let's say we have a chain link with 5 effects on that chain. When all 5 of those effects resolved, they just so happened to also cause 5 other cards to meet their activation requirements. Once the chain resolves, the card that the final effect to resolve caused to meet its activation requirement will go on the chain first, and the card that the first card to resolve caused to resolve will go on the chain last. If there are any cards that would enter this chain that have the word "when" in the activation requirement, then it will not be able to enter the chain unless it is the card that starts the chain, and the only way for it to start the chain is if it meets its activation requirements from the most recent card to resolve. If there's anything so far that I've said that you don't understand, please watch everything I've said so far again. I know that there are a lot of words being repeated, but hopefully the images make it easy to focus on the main points. To make this easier to remember, here is a very simple way to know if something will miss timing. First, you check if it says "when," and then if it says "you can," or if it is a face down quick play spell or a trap. If it doesn't say "when" or doesn't say "you can" and isn't a face down quick play spell or trap, then it won't be able to miss timing. Second, is the top card on the chain link the card that triggers your effect? If so, you won't miss the activation timing. To be real with you, most cards don't miss timing. It is important to know your stuff in the case that one does come up though. You can actually force cards to miss timing though, if you have the right cards to do so. But I am going to talk more about that in the next ruling video, which is going to be about the chain link more in depth. If you have any more questions about this, if there was anything you had trouble understanding, let us know in the comments and we can try to word it differently so that it makes more sense for your communication style and learning style. But yeah guys, some of you wanted to see some videos explaining some rulings. These rules may be simple to understand for people with a lot of experience, but they can be pretty difficult to explain, especially when rules like this seem so pointless. Like, why did something like this exist in the game in the first place? If you like these kinds of videos and you want to see more of them, slap like now, subscribe if you haven't already, hit that bell to get notified every time we make a new video, leave a comment letting us know what rulings you want us to explain, and I've been Undead from Team 6K, signing out.
Hey, why they gotta hate on me? I done got me 250,000 views and they still saying they low key. They ain't wanna come work with the kid, but I'm flexing with Zay on beats. How they ask for a spot at the gym, but they leave all the weight on me. I don't ask them to wait on me. They would ask where they gon' be with a song if they wanted the weatherman. I ain't asking to pay no fees. She was homeless and needed a spot. I ain't ask her to pay no lease. I ain't ask her to say no please. I ain't ask her to make no cheese. Scream fake but it ain't on me. Got clean so it ain't no streets. Why green if it ain't no keeps? Brought cream so it ain't no beef. My team say it ain't no chief. My demon they hang on me. They seemingly ain't no peace. I seen him, he ain't no beast. For real.